Thank you so much. At 5:07 p.m., I'm going to call the Wednesday, July 19th Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. Can I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavez.
Here. Oh.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Counselor Michael Garcia. Counselor Villarreal.
Present.
Chair Cassett.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
There are no changes.
Thank you so much. And can I please get a motion?
To approve.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Going on to approval of the consent agenda. I have item C pulled by Counselor Lee Garcia. Item G pulled by Counselor Chavez. Item J pulled by Counselor Chavez. Item K pulled by Councilwoman Villarreal. And item O pulled by Counselor Chavez, Counselor Lee Garcia, and myself. Are there any other items to be pulled from the consent agenda at this time? And is that all correct?
Madam Chair, did you say item I?
I did not.
Okay.
Did you want to pull that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do we have staff here for item I? Did you? Let me make sure.
Oh, no, wait,
Okay.
not I. If you can circle back up.
Sure.
It was H. You called H, right?
Nope. I can go ahead and I'll call H. Unfortunately, we do have Rich here, so good recovery. So yes, I have C from Counselor Lee Garcia, G and J from Counselor Amanda Chavez, now H from Counselor Michael Garcia, K from Counselor Villarreal, and O from Counselor Chavez, Counselor me, and Counselor Lee Garcia.
Me.
Counselor me. Did I get them all? All right, we're covered. Can I get a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavez.
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal. Chair me.
Yes.
Chair Cassett.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Motion carried.
All right, moving on to our first item pulled. This is item C. It's a request for approval of a professional services agreement with FII National DBA Up Together in the total amount of $1 million in eviction prevention funds to respond to the impact of the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts through June 30th, 2024. We have Judy Sanchez, our Youth and Family Services Division Director, here to present and answer questions. Counselor Lee Garcia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and not too many questions. I think similar to what I've asked in the past, but this this item looks like it's where are we at? Professional service agreement with FII or FLL, National DBA Up Together in a total amount of $1 million in eviction prevention funds to respond to the impact of the public health emergency and its negative impact. First question I have is funding. Where's this coming from?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, this funding was dedicated actually in fiscal year 23. Because of negotiations with the contractor, services got delayed, and so it's in the FY24 budget. And so this is general fund money.
General fund money, and it's not a bar or anything that has to be done. Was appropriated. Was it accounted for in the new fiscal year?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, yes.
Thank you. When do we, I think it's going to be a while until we kind of see people get on their feet and need some type, these type of assistance. When do we project maybe running out of funding to help people?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, currently in our Connect network, which the care coordination system and resource referral system for our community, housing and housing instability is probably our absolute biggest referrals that we receive. So it could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to 8 months. But what I would love to do at some point is to be able to present to this committee about what we're seeing in the community, where we're at with expenditures. And one of our measurements and goals is actually going to be if folks are better off in their housing situations when they receive this funding.
Thank you. So then this has been, obviously, since the pandemic has started. We've created programs to help people, and what you're seeing are, what's the success? What is our, are we, obviously you can't help every single person, but what has been the success of this in a sense, and kind of get what your take is on that?
So Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I think measuring success is one, making sure that the outcome is that folks are stably housed, right? That they're not ending up becoming homeless or entering into the homeless system. That's really what we want to avoid. And then also getting that individual or family linked up to other services that they may not know that they qualify for. So one of the main entryways into accessing this funds is through our Connect network. So that's either through a direct referral from one of our partner agencies. It could be a self-referral through our online platform, or it could be just calling 211. And so those are, and then once that person enters the system, we screen them. So for finances, interpersonal safety, food security, as well as housing. And so if they're flagged for any one of those, we'll navigate them to an individual or a community provider to help provide that service. So it's not just eviction prevention funding they may be eligible for, but it may also be like financial counseling or case management or behavioral health. So we're really fully holistically looking at wrapping services around each one of these individuals that enter the system.
Thank you. When I look at these programs, I look at, obviously helping people, but I also look at getting people on the track to be self-sustaining. And, I think the hardest part of our population is the workforce that's earning between $15 and even $20 an hour. And those people are having a hard time attaining, obviously, either rental units or buying a house. And we've gone through this over and over and over. What can be done? What can be done? And I think that a lot of times what we need to strive for is, again, like I stated, making people solvent and able to care for themselves. That's the bottom line. And do it in a manner that's humane and caring and so on and so forth. And so, when I see these coming through, questions pop up. And it's like, okay, well, there's already these other assistance programs. There's already, whether it's food stamps or other assistance that are need, and they have a job. What's the percentage of people that will qualify for this, or what are the qualifications to get this assistance?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. So currently the qualifications, they have to meet 200% of federal poverty, which is about $60,000 for a family of 4. Our poverty level in the city, because of our cost of living, is incredibly high. And so that level is equal to what would be considered 200% of poverty in our community. One of the things I really appreciate about this committee and all of you is you all are very data driven. And so one of the things that we do not have a solid number on is data on evictions and data on folks facing addiction or facing evictions and the reasons why. And so part of having this funding out there is taking this year to measure why folks are falling behind. Is it because of what you're saying around the cost of living? Is it because folks are $15, $20? Is it because of, unfair landlords? Is it because we don't really have the data or a reason to draw in order to make those conclusions? But I think with this pilot, we'll get a snapshot into what our community is facing in terms of housing instability and evictions.
Thank you. And I think, we talked about the cost of living, facing eviction. But I think a lot of times we we tend to maybe not look at what the economy in general, inflation on its own, and where we're going with the $15, $20, $30 minimum. Well, you know, people are making that already depending on if they work 40 hours plus overtime plus things. And then I get the whole quality of life issue. But so again, I striking a balance. I like a pilot program. And you know, we're seeing it in the job market right now where we're having a hard time finding people to work. And is it because they have so much assistance? Where do we draw that barrier where we can make sure people are able to work? I mean, an entry-level job, just take a minimum wage. What qualifications are needed? You know, or is it just a standard? that we take away from the people that are able to earn more, can think more, do more, have higher education, things of these things. And every time I turn around, businesses are looking for help. And they say, well, raise the wages. Okay, I'm raising wages. I have raised. I've seen more businesses raise wages than I haven't. And they're still trying to find people. And so I think that we walk that fine line of assistance and helping people out of their situation versus constantly giving them. And so I'm for it. I just wanted to bring up those points, and I kind of wanted to see where your qualification levels are. It would be nice to have a report as to, okay, well, if you fall within this earning bracket, if you're single, if you fall in with this earning bracket, if you have a dual income household, you know, some people may have children that work and contribute. I mean, there's a lot of contributing to some of these things. And so, you know, how do we just manage it properly, help the people that need it, and continue from there? And so I'm for it. I just had those questions in the back of my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee?
Move to approve.
If not, I do have one thing to add to some of what you're talking about, Counselor Garcia, in terms of looking at what has happened in our community. And I think another piece of this data that we need to look into, and I would ask Director Sanchez, you know, to be thinking about this as well, is what we've seen happen over the course of the pandemic, where I think the data is, you know, 10,000 or so people left and 11,000 or so moved in, and the change in the median income and how that was impacted. And so, you know, of course, the challenge of people not finding workers, I would hazard a guess that our workers left because a lot of them were not able to remain in the community. And so that is part of I think part of that piece that we need to look at is that, you know, at the lower end of the income scale, if individuals cannot hang on, they will simply leave a community that has such a high cost of living as Santa Fe does. And so Director Sanchez, as we are continuing to research, you know, what is going on in our community, that's hard to capture because they're gone. So we can't really necessarily talk to them about that. But I know that we do have some data and some numbers as we look at the demographic shift that has occurred over the last couple of years. And I'd be really interested in how that potentially correlates, integrates with the work that you'll be doing here. Thank you. Thank you. If no other questions or comments, a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Chavez. Counselor Lee Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Chair Cassett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. And if I could actually get a motion to rearrange the agenda, items G and J, Counselor Chavez pulled to recuse herself. So if somebody could amend the agenda to hear item G and J and then H, so that Counselor Chavez can just leave and not have to come back and forth, that'd be great.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call on that?
Well, yes, but I gotta recuse myself from J, so
Oh, you do too?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do G and then J, and then everyone can come back for H, right? Okay, great. So roll call on amending the agenda to go G, J, HKO.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item G. This is request for approval of amendment number 2 to item number 23-0011 with Santa Fe Public Schools for the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA work-based learning contract to delete current payment segmentation over months and years. I don't believe we have staff here to answer because this was just a recusal. So Counselor Chavez, do you want to go ahead? And are there any questions or comments about this item? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion a second, roll call vote, please.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item J. This is a request for approval of a memorandum of understanding with Santa Fe Public Schools for the Volunteer Station Agreement Foster Grandparent Program.
All right, I recuse myself from this item as I work for the federal agency that hosts this volunteer program.
Wonderful, thank you. And Counselor Chavez is recusing herself from this item as well. And any questions or comments? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I please have a roll call?
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. Moving back to item H. I can text them. Yes. I'm getting them. Oh, she might not be here. Somebody poke your head out. Doesn't work if I text her if her phone's in here. Okay, good. Everyone come back. Both of them need to come back. I'm so sorry. Don't worry. I will lead you through where we go next. Moving on to item H. This is request for approval to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement with Midtown Santa Fe Productions QOF LLC to negotiate terms for land and building disposition and development of the Midtown Production Studios lot pursuant to the city's request for proposals number 23-35-P with a good faith deposit in the amount of $7,500. It looks like we have, hi, we have Pat Fagali here. And there are people on Zoom. We have Rich Brown, I believe, is here, and hopefully Lee Logston and Daniel Hernandez were able to jump on as well. But if not, we have Rich. Michael Garcia, Council Michael Garcia.
Madam Chair, just got a quick couple questions. First question, $7,500 down payment seems very low. It seems about, just doing math, 1% of potential final sale disposition price. And I guess my question is, how do we arrive at that number? Because, and the reason I'm asking is last time we entered into an ENA, it was when we were looking at Midtown disposition of the property right at the beginning of the pandemic, and just kind of second bat at this, just looking in the city's best interest, and is $7,500 warranting slowing down of the process? And so I guess the clarification how we arrived at that figure.
I think I'll let Director Brown answer that if he's.
We also
you,
have
Mr.
Daniel
Fagali.
Hernandez in the waiting room, I believe, if we can get
Oh,
him.
he is? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia. Yes, I try to scramble the staff to sort of answer some of these questions, but hopefully I can answer it if Daniel can't come on. The 7,500 is just a good faith number. When we originally did the master one, it was 15,000. So this is just a good faith signing agreement. It's not the disposition. It's just a good faith number. We just used this number, we agreed upon this number as an amount that was nominal. It's not supposed to be a massive amount. It's just supposed to be a nominal amount you're supposed to add to the ENA number. So there's no real, Newton math attached to it, but it's just a number we felt that was nominal and would move this ENA agreement forward. It's a short period of time. I think we're looking at a 2-month period.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying. There wasn't some type of equation, algorithm, et cetera,
No.
that as it was. Okay. Thank you for clarifying
Sure.
that, Director Brown. Last question I have is in the packet. It's on page, I have 33, but maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Oh yeah, page 33 of the packet materials. Stated proposed lease DDA closing 9/1/2023. And given we're already at nearly the end of July, and it seems like there's an extensive amount of work that needs to be completed, are we still on track with a potential closing date of September 1st?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I'm hoping that Mr. Hernandez is on the phone. We are.
I am.
Oh, you are. Good. Okay. Daniel, if you could respond to that.
Sure. It's a great question and one that we had lengthy discussions around, Councilor. Yes, they're still on track. They've actually have done a lot of pre-work. The RFP, when you review it, you'll see that there was a lot of due diligence work during the time of even putting the RFP together. We won't see this again, most likely in future RFP responses and submissions, but because he's doing a lot of work on the adjacent parcel, there was a lot of work he was able to do. All that is to say, he's still comfortable with the schedule. We're comfortable with the schedule during the negotiations of this ENA. So I think we can meet those deadlines. But we did put in an extension period just in case there was any T's to be crossed, I's to be dotted, so that we can meet those deadlines. He has a financial benchmark in mid-September to deploy funds because of opportunity zone parameters, funds that he has, and so we're trying to work around his schedule as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I really appreciate that and hope you're not stuck in LA traffic right now.
No, I just arrived in San Francisco, so yeah.
It's worse.
I guess my next question, because I do have a number of questions, I think we're going to be having an executive session on this topic. So I will have some questions that are more appropriate for that. But my last question is, and I feel we can't stress it out enough or put it out for public consumption enough in regards to what is the next steps in the process. This is the exclusive negotiation step. What is the next steps? Just so the public is aware of what legislation will be coming forth before the governing body. That way the public is aware if they want to provide any input.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Sure. So the ENA, the exclusive negotiation agreement, is the last step in the RFP process. That does not mean that the terms that the offer has put forward in the RFP submission is final. So that's why we need this period of time to negotiate final terms. The focus will be on performance measures, meaning the phasing of the project, the financing of the project, and other responsibilities we want him to implement. So that's what we'll be dealing with in the terms of the disposition development agreement. That agreement, the September deadlines that are in the schedule, that agreement will come back to the governing body for review and approval as well. In all of the RFPs, because of the community development plan driving a lot of the way the RFPs are driven, we want to hear from the respondents about community engagement during the planning and implementation of their project. So the offers will be responsible for community engagement work as well during the future planning and finalization of their plans in the development process.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I really appreciate that. With that, no other questions. Happy to make a motion to approve.
Thank you so much. I do believe that we do have some other questions, though, from Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So in regards to that 7,500 down payment, is that being treated as like an, not an escrow, like earnest money?
Madam Chair.
It's more good faith.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Rich, you can answer it if you want.
No, it is more, it's good faith. It's earnest from a standpoint of we are in this hopefully 2-month phase of the ENA, and so it's a nominal amount that we're asking for, that we've agreed upon.
Thank you. And that's, that goes off of their total once everything goes through, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it goes towards the balance. That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you so much. And if there are any other questions or comments? And I'm ready for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Chavez.
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Chair Cassett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Turned off my mic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving down to item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for being with us.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
And Pat, thank you also for jumping in. We appreciate it. All right, consideration, this is item K. It's consideration of bill number 2023-20, sponsored by Mayor Weber, Counselor Cassett, me, Counselor Mara Worth, and Counselor Michael Garcia. It is a bill relating to metropolitan redevelopment, deleting the content of section 7-2 regarding urban renewal, repealed by state law in 2008, and replacing it with the city's Metropolitan Redevelopment Code, section 6-13 and 6-14, amended to be consistent with state law, delete language specific to a business capital district, limit Metropolitan Redevelopment Commission leasing authority to that specified in a particular metropolitan development plan, and specify qualifications for Metropolitan Redevelopment Commissioners. Rich Brown and Marcos Martinez are here to present and answer questions. Councilman Villarreal, to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, staff, for being here. Ultimately, I support this and I understand the changes. I was just trying to get some clarity on some sections that were removed and also changed. And I guess first off, maybe the sponsors can explain to me, because we did add some language about the Metropolitan Redevelopment Commission and how they're selected. So if you go to page 5 of the bill, it talks about the mayor, essentially with the consent of the governing body, makes the appointments of the Board of Commissioners. And the language, it says with the advice and consent of the governing body, and advice was struck out. And I was just curious if there was a reason why that was removed. Because ultimately this body should represent in a lot of different ways, and also geographically too, I would say. That it should be representative of the community. So I was just curious about that piece being removed.
Yeah, this was changed to be consistent with what is in the updated charter. My understanding is when this was previously passed, this was prior to the changes to the charter. Am I remembering our history correct, Marcos? And so that change was to be consistent with what is stated in our charter regarding appointments. Marcos, did I get that correct?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm not sure if that particular change is related to the charter. It may relate more to the conformity with state law, because the state law, which part of this bill's purpose is to bring our Metropolitan Redevelopment Code in conformity with state law describes. Oh. I stand corrected. This, in fact, does have to do with the charters, and it may also. I'll be researching the state law question, but our charter does say appoint with the consent of the governing body members of advisory commissions. So I think this was just meant to reflect the language in the charter. Thank you. You were correct, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
So but there's nothing to say that we can't keep that language with the advice and consent of the governing body.
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. That language is parallels some of the language under federal law where the president makes appointments with the advice and consent of the Senate. And so that language may have been in the prior version of the code before this charter amendment was passed. It certainly was, because this charter amendment is newer than the last incarnation of the code, which was in 2000. So I think there were some debates over whether the advice and consent add something or not. So I'm not sure about answering that question as if they're fully synonymous or not right now, but I can look into that question.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm just curious if if there's no real reason to strike it or take it out, that I think it adds to kind of the conversation about who's going to be appointed to this board. And I was actually curious if the sponsors could maybe say why there wasn't any language about how there would be a process of each district potentially appointing somebody from their district, and having it kind of be more inclusive of the governing body as a whole instead of just the mayor. So I'm just wondering if anyone had some input on that, or if you had considered that.
And this language is directly taken from the statute, which puts that power to the mayor to make these appointments and does not sort of disseminate it to the members of the governing body themselves. So I do know that this section reflects what state law requires.
What state law requires. So if we were wanting to expand it to governing body appointments by district, could that be an amendment to this legislation?
Well, it would be in conflict with what the state law appointment provision says. So we'd have to analyze whether the city could make a change under its home rule powers or not.
Right.
I can speak a little bit to that as well, in terms of, the district piece. But coming back to the expertise and experience in those areas and wanting to make sure that those areas were represented and that we'd be able to really be able to represent that expertise on the commission. And sometimes if we're doing like a district wide, or, somebody representative from each district, we might not necessarily, we might have a hard time balancing, as well as if there is, some people that we think would be really specific, but it would break the district balance, then that could be a challenge. So, happy to continue to look into it. But I think with something like this, there is a really important aspect of whose skills and knowledge are at the table, and trying to make sure that is widely represented. That makes sense.
Yes, and I'm looking at that section that was added. It says expertise or experience in one or more of the following areas. One or more of the following areas. Okay, so it says commercial property development, affordable housing development, community planning, banking or financial services, or representing communities in need. The language, the way this is written, it says or, so it's not saying each of these areas we want. And that's what I think we should have. And actually I'd be more in favor of that versus maybe district selections or recommendations. Because if you look at all these, I think they're all important. And because we say one or more, and then we say or at the end of number 4, that means we're not looking at all of these as a potential expertise or experience. So I think I'd like to change that language with an amendment to make that more, what's the word? That we have at least one person that has that expertise on there. So is it 5 members, right?
Yes, and the number is set by statute.
5, and then one of each of these areas would be required is kind of how I see it. So that's something to that I'll be considering. And then if you go further down, let's see, it's talking about the role of the Metropolitan Redevelopment Commission and what it's charged with doing or considering. And if you go to page 8, there's a lot of areas that were struck out about looking at traffic, pedestrian issues, connectivity, utilities, impacts on adjacent established neighborhoods. So there's a whole slew of, there's probably 16 different possibilities of certain things they would be considered to look at when they're considering a plan. And all of that was struck out. So I'm just curious why that was struck out, because I think there were some actually interesting things, important things that they should consider. So maybe if there's someone that could explain to me why that was struck.
Yes, and that was struck also to bring it in conformity with state law. All of those elements were there. None of those elements were required, but the elements that were required under state law were not present in our plan. So I think the goal here was to simplify just to pare it down to what elements were required under state law for a plan to adopt. And then these particular provisions that were in here are at a level of detail that one might expect in a plan itself. And so my understanding of how this would proceed is that when were the commission to exist, and if they were to adopt a plan, then they would address these particular types of issues that they would want to be addressed in the plan. And then the governing body would adopt that plan if it agreed with it. And it would also have to go through a resolution to adopt such a plan with a public hearing as well. So those are the processes under state law, a much narrower plan requirements. But when we have our specific plans to consider a particular metropolitan redevelopment area, that plan will then address whatever facts on the ground are necessary, because not all of these may have been necessary for every particular plan. And that would have to come through as a recommendation from the commission to the governing body. The governing body would then have a chance to consider input on that plan, reject it, or to adopt it or amend it. And that's where I would see a lot of these good ideas, which I agree are perhaps wise ideas, but none of them reflected the actual requirements under state law.
I guess I'm curious if I understand what you mean about that. They're not required by the state. So I'm wondering where can we capture them? Because I actually think they're really good pieces or elements or details that should be captured somewhere when, I don't know, in the planning stage. I don't know where we could actually make sure that they should be things that whoever's applying, whatever kind of plan is being proposed, that these are some of the things, some of the elements that need to be considered. Obviously they wouldn't all apply, but do you all have suggestions about that? Because I feel like we're missing some really good provisions or elements that need to be considered. And I'm not sure where they would be placed if they're not placed in an ordinance here.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may speak to Councilor Villarreal, I don't know if Mr. Martinez is still there. Some of that you will find in both the master plan and our community development plan. I don't have them with me right now, but I think some of that is part of what we did on our community development and master plan. So some of those elements are part of what we did, and our community development plan is very unique from anywhere that you've done development around the country. So I will have to look that in there and get back to you.
Yeah, I think in this case, I think Midtown did have those elements. Is that what you're referring to? Director Brown, the master plan for Midtown? think that's
Yes.
what, yeah,
Yes.
so, I think- but in that case, in the future, when some of us are not here, maybe staff's not, no longer here, that I'd want us to make sure
Oh.
we don't miss out on, some of the elements that we want the plans to address, I guess. So I don't know what the solution is for that, but if anyone has any ideas, I'm open to it. I just think there's so much that was removed here. I understand for compatibility with the state legislation, but they're good points and good pieces.
Yeah.
So if we could think about ways to capture it, in Midtown, it was just that there was the foresight, and then also the community input really drove a lot of these pieces of things to consider. I just was thinking in the future when we have plans that come to us, I wouldn't want these pieces to be missed. So
Yeah.
my colleagues can think of something without necessarily keeping it in this ordinance. I would be open to consideration for that.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, Councilor Vera, I think it's a good idea. And I think two areas that I would like to just suggest for now. One is that we planned for developments of this size. We do plan to use our templates of the community development plan and the master plan that we did before. But also it's a great idea to sort of possibly have our staff start to reach out to our state and Senate representatives to see if there's possibilities of, Albuquerque has lots of MRAs. Las Cruces has lots of MRAs. So there is an MRA kind of study group, so to speak, and they may be able to say we're using the power of that lobby to affect the state laws. So
you're suggesting maybe there's a possibility for state legislation? Like adding
yeah.
some more elements like this into the state legislation or state?
Yes. Yeah, I'm Chair Councilor Rio. I'm saying that I'd like to take this idea to the MRA cities that are there now to see if they have addressed this in some way. Maybe they have some ideas that we can come back to this body with. But I'm just talking out loud right now. But right now, I think the ordinance that you see in front of you is really following the state law, and we want to see if there's any ways to sort of have some foresight to bring those, if we're not just doing a community development plan or a master plan for the scale that we're at right now.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan to start. It's because once it's gone, no one will remember that this was in here. So I want to capture it somewhere. Or at least a template maybe that we use or think about for the future for any projects that we see at the council level. The other thing is the memo talked about, let me see if I can find the memo, that this also addressed cleaning up language around what is it called? The agency, MRA agency, or I don't know what are we calling it? So there's the commission, and then there would be a department, right? Or some kind of, is it a department within our?
Yes, and unfortunately, this is also another consequence of the state law terminologies. They say that there may be an agency, that the agency conducts all of its work through a commission. But we in the city typically would think of this as the department, the agency.
Okay, so we don't need language in this MRA talking about, or maybe I missed it, that there'll be the development of a creation of a department, or is that somewhere stated?
Yes, it is stated in here. Let me see if I can find the section for you.
I guess I got confused about the agency versus department.
Yeah.
If you could just locate that for me, that would be great.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, but while Mr. Martinez is looking for that copy, keep in mind that in the last budget, the FY 24 budget that was approved, there is an MRA director that is slated to report to me in the Office of Economic Development as part of the Midtown Redevelopment Plan. So there is a department person, just like we have an asset development manager. This MRA will be separate specifically for our metropolitan redevelopment area that we're there. And then they will sort of govern the commission, so to speak, that comes from there. But they all report up into the Office of Economic Development to the Community Development Director.
Yes, thanks for the reminder. I do remember that. That's why I was wondering if we needed to state it a specific way, and if I think I missed it in the ordinance. Did you find the language where it might be located?
So the agency is created under, you can find it on page 4 of the ordinance at the bottom, around the line, starting around line 20, 21. Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, creation and purpose. Governing body hereby creates Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, which shall be comprised of a Metropolitan Redevelopment Commission. Its staff shall be the official body for making advisory recommendations to the governing body regarding the planning, preservation, rehabilitation, redevelopment, development, or management of properties designated by the governing body, consistent with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, etc. And then it goes on to describe the power of the commission itself. That's where we get into the appointment of the commissioners, but below that, powers and duties, which is now on page 7, really around line 6.
Okay.
So it's created under, on the bottom of page 4, it works through the commission, and it should function like a division of the city, another division of the city.
Okay. So, and that wasn't new language, the page 4 that you were talking about, except for the underlined piece. So,
That's right.
so if we refer it to agency here, it could be synonymous with a department. Okay. I think that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? Not, can I have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcos. Thanks, Rich. All right, moving on to consideration of item O. Consideration of bill number 2023-23, sponsored by myself and Councilwoman Villarreal. It's a bill creating Article 18-18, the high-end excise tax for affordable housing ordinance, establishing an excise tax on the transfer of certain residential property and dedicating the revenues to affordable housing. We have Aaron McSherry, our city attorney, and Alexandra Ladd, our director of the Office of Affordable Housing, here to answer questions. Counselor Chavez and Counselor Lee Garcia, you both pulled this. Which one wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, Counselor Chavez.
I really just wanted to hear from the sponsors on kind of their journey in coming to the 3% and the $1 million. If you guys like what comparisons were done, what data was used, like just kind of what that looked like and exploring options when you were considering those two amounts.
I'll go ahead and start with this one. I think that there are a couple pieces that we were looking at. One is looking at the previous sales from over the last few years, and what could we expect on an average. Last year, I believe there were over 400 homes that were sold at over $1 million, which would have resulted in approximately 9 million into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so really ensuring that there would be an adequate supply, and also looking at, where can people expect to be able to afford a home? I unfortunately don't have I wish I had my statistics right in front of me. But the vast majority of Santa Feans cannot afford $1 million home. I believe it was 6%, 9% of Santa Feans could be able to afford a $1 million home. And so really looking at where are there individuals that are coming in and who do have the ability to provide that type of benefit to our community. In terms of the 3% versus a 1% versus a 2%, again, what seemed reasonable based on the fact that we were looking at just over $1 million, what is still achievable. The $1 million as well, you know, previous councils looked at a $750,000 cutoff. But when we look at the median price of housing in Santa Fe, unfortunately, because it has gone up so much, a cutoff there really would capture a lot of Santa Feans that are trying to get into homes that it does become really challenging. We know a lot of people are spending more on what they can, having to spend more in order to get into housing. So it is a balance, you know, it's a balance of what is reasonable, what is getting us a really good stream of funding into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Where is it, you know, that people will be able to actually, you know, that we're really impacting individuals that we feel or that are able to provide this minimal one-time payment, as opposed to those that it would really just push completely out of the housing market.
And I'm so sorry. Can you repeat again how many homes it was sold last year? How many homes were sold? It was 1 million plus?
No.
No, I know at $1 million or more.
Oh, yes. Over 400 homes in 2022, and it would have resulted in approximately $9 million into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund last year if this had been in place.
And to add to that, I think there was 45% of the homes that were sold. 45% of the homes that were sold were above $1 million.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. I just wanted more information. And did you look at how other municipalities were dealing with this? Because I dove in briefly, I don't have a lot of information, but I know that there has been a lot of exploration in other cities, and the way they do it looks very different. Did you guys look at any cities that were comparable to Santa Fe and deciding on those?
So it's actually really, really tough because a lot of times this is happening at a state level, not at a municipality. When we are seeing municipalities, it is larger areas like New York City, Washington, DC, which is, you know, Washington, DC. So it's a little bit separate because they don't have a state attached to them. There have been some models where they do like a cutoff and then it's a one-time fee. So it's like any house over $1 million, you're paying $10,000. There have been some interesting market impacts there versus this being really a progressive tax. So as individuals do have more money that they can contribute, they are doing so. So it is at the same percentage of other individuals that are not paying as much of a house. So it does absolutely vary based on the different housing markets. What are you seeing? You know, Santa Fe, one of our really unique components of and challenges of our housing market is we are such a popular place to move. And we do know that we are seeing a lot of displacement that is happening around the country, but in Santa Fe, you know, as we know, we have families that have been here for generations that we're seeing them both pushed to a different part of the city and in many instances completely out of the city. And so as we were really looking at what this design would be, also taking into the consideration of what have other places done, what have other states done, what seems, you know, what have other states been able to easily implement or other cities, as well as what are the unique qualifications, what are the unique characteristics of what we're seeing and how do we balance those?
Thank you. I appreciate that information. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate you guys bringing this forward. I have a few questions and I think I'm going to start off with and I may have missed it, probably did if it was in there, but residents buying houses above $1 million. Is it all residents? Is it excluding New Mexico residents?
No, it is all residents that are purchasing homes over $1 million or all buyers, because they may not all be residents. All buyers purchasing homes over $1 million. They might become residents and they may not. We see a lot of that happening too.
right? So it does nothing towards second homes, people from outside of New Mexico, obviously buying second and third homes.
Unfortunately, we are restricted by state law. We cannot necessarily differentiate, second homes versus primary residence. And so it really is, focused on anybody purchasing a home over $1 million. Am I incorrect in that?
Counselor or Chair Cassidy, counselors, I have not, I'm
Okay.
not asked to look into that specifically. So that's possible. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. But no, we're not just looking at specifically second homeowners. We are looking at individuals who are purchasing a home over $1 million and them really being able to contribute back to the community.
Thank you. Another question I have, and this goes to family transfer. And so in a family transfer, there's obviously a value that's being transferred from the father to the son, father to the, could be a brother to a brother. Could be, I know, a husband and wife, that's community property, or if they're married. But, how does that work? Is there anything in there that will, in the case that somebody inherits a home that's above $1 million,
Family transfers are exempt.
they are exempt?
Yes.
Short answer. Okay, perfect. That's,
I know where you're going.
all right, good, perfect.
Chair Cassidy, counselors, so it depends on what you're defining as a family transfer. Certainly inheritance is excluded. But if you are paying someone in a regular transaction who is in your family, through a not community property, you are paying them, then that would be covered. But there are exemptions for inheritance. There's exemptions for a few other types that would, I think, fall into the categories that were just being considered. Specifically, joint tenancies are excluded when the value and except in certain circumstances where additional consideration is paid. So this is on, you want to look at all the exemptions. There's quite a few. They start on page 6 and they go to page 7. So there's one specific to transfer of real property by reason of death, will, or decree of distribution, and that's F.
What about gifting?
Right. So if there's no payment made, then it's not a payment over $1 million. So there really does have to be a transfer of consideration of over $1 million. So it's not about the value of the property or of the transfer. It's about what's being paid.
So family person sells to another family person and it's $1.5 million. They are not taxed on the 500,000.
Chair Cassidy, Counselor Garcia, it sounds like they probably would unless a different exemption applies for that part above $1 million. So if they pay, you're saying they pay 1.5 million in consideration, right, for the receipt of the transfer of the property.
Okay.
Then I think that would apply unless a different exemption applies for some reason.
Inheritance would be
Exempt, yes.
you mentioned something about joint purchases. How does that work?
Counselor Cassidy, Counselor Garcia, it's actually joint, it's a joint tenancy, which is more about where you hold something jointly together, like two owners together. So you're already owning it at the same time. The one about, just going to highlight one other one. R is about a deed or conveyance reflecting an spousal transfer. That's excluded as well. There's some very specific types of familial transactions that are exempt, a number of them.
I'll revisit that. Thank you for the explanation. And let's see, as we were going along, I had a few others. So you said in 2022, there was over 400,000 homes that were sold.
Over 400,
Over 400,
not 400,000, over
400
400 homes sold
single
that were
homes,
over $1 million.
over $1 million. Okay, perfect. And this is just residency. This is houses, not businesses, not dwellings, like obviously business buildings, things of that nature.
Correct. These are homes for residences.
Thank you. So walk me down, and I know we're looking for a funding source, more of a permanent funding source. You said it's a progressive tax. However, what happens in 5 years that houses are 1.5 million or 1.10 million? And again, we're taking into consideration that the average income is also increased and people are able to afford houses that are higher, whether through lending or things of that nature.
There is a provision in here that adjusts the cutoff point for when the excise tax is implemented based on the adjustments from the consumer price index for, what is it, Western region for urban workers, or I need to look at the precise, but basically we will be going after the increase in the consumer price index relevant to our region from the previous year, and we'll have a corresponding increase to where the cutoff point is to adjust for that inflation.
Thank you. Another question. So let's just say, for example, well, we already have an income stream coming in from the fee in lieu of. And now this would be another tax. Well, that's a fee, not a tax. It's a tax on homes. And this income will go also to the same department, to the affordable housing. And
Not, correction, not to the department, but to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So the trust fund does not pay for any staff salaries, but specific to direct assistance for individuals or building of affordable units. So not to our staff.
thank you for that clarification. I think that a lot of times the public needs to hear that because they feel maybe directors or staff and all these. So the question that revolves around that is when we're talking about data-driven decisions and funding this trust fund primarily goes towards down payment assistance, rental housing, whether it's rent income assistance, all items that would, help a person either attain a dwelling unit or stay in one. And it seems as if we are having quite a bit of an issue of units. And so how does this affect the way units are created? Because obviously, we all bought a house, if we did buy a house, and it was initial investment and it's taken time. We made a mortgage payment and it accrued. And so, obviously the goal is to try to get as many people that want to be in for sale housing. And so how do we get to that number that says, okay, we are creating more inventory, more dwelling units? And I know, again, I think that it's a multifaceted question because it takes not just, our wage earners to earn more, maybe people who need the assistance that don't qualify, maybe the bracket needs to be moved a little bit because of the way that is working these days with all the costs, and what two people can actually make in a household. And so from a data-driven perspective, how does this create more housing?
So I think that's a really important question. This could create more housing as these dollars can be utilized to leverage the funding or to receive funding for other for developments that can be building affordable units. And I will let Alexandra speak to that in more detail. But I think the really important piece here is that this is not the silver bullet that's going to solve our housing crisis. This is one portion of it. This really looks at some of the funding aspects that we need to be doing. I do have some other legislation that I am working on that is looking at how do we create more affordable units? How do we incentivize the utilization of the building of affordable units? and what is it that is going to help us really get those units on the ground. So in some sense, there is a component to this that will help get units on the ground when these dollars can be utilized and leveraged for nonprofit developers who are creating affordable units. But it by no means indicates that we do not need to be looking at other strategies, that we do not need to be looking at our land use codes, our zoning, all of those other components that really go, our inclusionary zoning, that really go into how we create more affordable units. I would also say that this money does help make units affordable. So even if they're not specifically affordable units, if it does provide down payment assistance, that then they are able to obtain a unit that does not meet the quote unquote affordable definition, but it then makes it accessible to a family, it then increases their ability or their supply of potential affordable units, as well as with rental assistance. Councilman Villarreal, if you want to add more to that.
Yes, I would like to add to that. When we're looking at funding possibilities and some of the applications, they're not just all for down payment assistance or rental assistance. There is a big chunk of that, but yeah, I agree. Like, what is actually creating units? And some of them are, we have funded through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund new construction for rental affordable units. We've done rehabilitation of existing homes to keep people in their homes that have higher older housing stock. There's been just two on the top of my head that we were able to fund partially through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or the Santa Fe Suites. So that actually got folks that were transitioning out of homelessness and also low income individuals into that facility, into that project that we've supported. And then Lamplighter that will be coming online and hopefully next year. That was also something that we were able to support partially through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I'd say partially because we never have enough funding to be able to cover these projects to the full extent. So there's partners that are actually getting different funding sources and pulling them together in order to make it work. And Santa Fe Suites was one of them. Luckily, we had some federal funding to be able to support that. But I think there's a multitude of options through the years that we've used affordable housing trust funds, and we've been able to make more of an impact because we've committed to 3 million, all of us on the governing body the past couple of years. That has helped tremendously, because otherwise, it's not always consistent. And the thing that works well with Affordable Housing Trust Fund is it's very flexible funding source. The other funding source we use and pull from is the community development block grants, and they're through HUD, and they're very limited and very restricted. And so when we're trying to make recommendations with these grant applications, it's really hard because CDBG is always really difficult to get the funding sources because it's so restrictive. And then Affordable Housing Trust Fund gives us that flexibility. I don't know if Alex Ladd wanted to add to any of that. We don't see you online, but I know you're there. Our TV is, oh, there you go.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I think these are really great questions because they bring up the complexity that is affordable housing funding, and how powerful the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is, because it can both address the supply side. So as Councilor Villarreal spoke, we've used it for lots of different infrastructure costs for projects, for actual construction, for renovations. So those two motel projects will create, in between the two of them, almost 200 units of housing. So they were formerly motel rooms, now they'll be housing. And trust funds were instrumental in, and will be in the future, instrumental in both subsidizing the supply side, so paying for the rehab and those kinds of costs to bring those units online, but then also helping with the demand side. And when I mean demand side, I mean improving, expanding the ability of the consumer to afford the housing. So in this case, some of the renters at Santa Fe Suites use affordable housing trust funds to help pay their rent. So they're paying 1/3 of their incomes, but their incomes are so low, they still can't kind of afford the basic rent. So the trust funds help them afford the rent, just like trust funds can help a home buyer who may be buying an unrestricted house on the open market, or maybe buying a price restricted house through either the Santa Fe Homes program or through one of the nonprofits. The trust funds can help them build their capacity to buy the home. And so then that's kind of how the demand side is supported. Because if you don't have the capacity to buy it, then you're not going to be demanding it, right? So I think that's really important. And then back to your original question about the data, we know based on our current consolidated plan, and we'll know even more as of December when our strategic plan is finalized. We know the gap. We know how many earners are in each income range. We know how many homes are priced affordably in that income range. And then we know what that gap is, like what's missing for that income range. We also know based on the state's projections for how many housing needs we need, just considering growth and the creation of jobs. So we know what that number is. And that you would want to add that number to your gap number, right? To look at the total. So anytime we create an affordable unit, whether it's because we're helping someone pay their rent, so now that existing home is affordable, or whether we're fully subsidizing the creation, the production of new housing, we're closing that gap. So that's how we would measure whether we're accomplishing that. And there are lots of secondary effects from Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We know that every applicant, every nonprofit, especially who applies for funds, uses those funds to also leverage other funds. So when they're applying for a federal grant, they can say, hey, we just got awarded $500,000 of local funds, and the federal funder's like, yay, we like to see that there's a local commitment. And since you can't use federal funds to raise other federal funds, that makes the local funds even more powerful. So I would say, like, there's lots of little secondary benefits too to growing the trust fund balance. And it's also very heavily regulated, and it's not just a whimsical process.
I appreciate the answer, and I want to move on to a question that I had a conversation recently with one of our own city employees, and what are we doing to the gap where people fall short of qualifying? Because he gave me just an example. This person gave me an example of what they made together as a dual income earning family. And there was two obstacles. One was there was not a house in the price range that they could afford. And they didn't qualify for assistance. And, it was a decent amount. I know we try to attain 30% to not put a person, in a situation where their income is all going to housing. But what are we going to be doing looking in the future for looking at that gap? And it may be a formula between what houses are available at a certain price range. And because again, this goes back to building houses, stick for sale houses that people can buy and start off their journey on home ownership and creating their own little bit of wealth. And so, do we have a plan to look at these bars, so to speak, these ceilings?
Dr. Ladd, do you have, I have a couple things to say to that, but if I would give you the floor first, as you are always brilliant and well-informed.
Oh, well, I think it's a really, really complicated question. And there's always, I mean, just the general answer to anyone is if you go to one of the homeownership agencies, Housing Trust, HomeWise, or Habitat, that's where you can better understand what your buying power is, what you can qualify for, what your options are. You can get on waiting lists. You know, it's really the gateway to more affordable home ownership. That's not the only answer for a lot of people, though. A lot of people really need to stabilize their financial situation overall. And the way for them to do that before they can become a sustainable homeowner might be to have a more affordable rent. And then, of course, we have all of the issues with social determinants of health and how lack of stable housing really, really affects our community health, right? So I would say that it's kind of and the answer is like yes and yes. So we want all of these options to be on the table, and we want to be considering the whole spectrum of housing need as we allocate these funds. And we also want to make sure that the community has the capacity to use the funds efficiently, since we're not providing direct assistance to individuals. You know, we're working with these community partners. And so a lot of times they're applying for funds from the trust fund based on what they know meets the need that they're seeing for their clients walking through the door, or knowing what they have the capacity to do effectively and efficiently. So there are a lot of moving parts, I think, is the answer to your question. And we just have to be flexible and open and ready to respond to all of them.
Thank you. And, you know, in response to that, any complex problem can be broken down into simple solutions. And that's always where you find the best solutions for the long term. And so, you know, I think I go back to getting people started. You know, just like this family that's looking for a house, they don't find a house. They've done everything right. They have great credit scores. They have some saved in the bank. They have, you know, all these things, but they just still can't attain it. And I think that we're running down roads where a tax, I don't know. I'm not in favor of this. I'm not in full favor of it. I'm trying to pick it apart here. But you know, how do we get there? I do have one question in regards to Councilwoman Villarreal mentioned affordable housing builders. How many do we have in the city?
We have 3 dedicated nonprofit builders of homeownership housing. We have at least 4 or 5 or 6 nonprofits that have built affordable rental housing. And then every single private sector developer who comes through our Santa Fe Homes program is a provider of affordable housing, because they're building homes for income to sell for purchase for income qualified home buyers.
Thank you. And, you know, I think we're trying to get to a point where we have a builder that says, I'm going to build 100 houses. All 100 houses are going to be at this level. And I think that I understand costs. I'm a business owner, but I think that there are ways to get this done. And I think we're missing the mark a little bit, because we pass this, it goes into law. We start attaining all of this money. We're no better off situation in 5 years than we were today, or 10 or 5 years ago, or in 20 years. I don't know. Because I think the bottom line is it goes into units that are available, units that are attainable, and people being able to buy into these houses. And it's complex. It's very complex. But those are just some of the areas that I'm having with this. That was my last question, because, well, I could go into how much percentage of affordable housing unit does each of these nonprofits actually provide? And we can go into a percent and find out, well, was it 10%? Was it 5%? Did they provide 50% and then 50% market rate? Things of that nature. And I think we can go down that. I don't think we want to go down that right now. It's a rabbit hole. But I think these are all things to consider. And I think that a company that is really true about building affordable units can do it. They have all these tools in place. They have the government assistance. They have the tax write-offs they can utilize. And so I think that's almost the only way that we can achieve this affordable housing. Aside from that, we're just continuing to throw money at a problem that won't be fixed. And that's my concern. I'll stop there. Thank you.
I have a quick response to those. First of all, we do not have a healthy housing market, and that's one of our biggest issues. And that's a really complex piece because there are aspects of the market that we cannot control. Now, what is important is that we look at the levers that the city does have to pull, and we pull those hard. And this is one of them. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we know, is a key tool in being and allowing Santa Feans to access housing. Does it meet all of it? Absolutely not. So we do need more of this kind of workforce housing that's, this middle income housing that's a little bit hard to calculate and address. Some of this is, the supply side, that we simply have people who are buying multiple homes. We have vacation homes, we have short-term rentals, and all of these that start to decrease the supply of Santa Fe housing, and knowing that Santa Fe will continue to be a place where people move. That is going to be something that we will continue to have to work on. But we also do have some opportunities. Midtown is an opportunity. We do have some other potential developments that we can be looking at. And one of the again, this is not the only piece that will address this issue. And if we look at this as the only piece that will address this issue, then of course there are going to be areas that it's not going to be able to fix. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right, and this tax going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund provides a key funding source for a key tool, but it cannot possibly be the only tool. We again need to be looking at our planning arena. We need to be looking at our regulations. We need to be looking at zoning. And we need to see what are the other levers that are within our reach, and not all of them are. And will this completely solve the problem 100%? No. It's kind of like, we're never going to completely solve poverty. I always say in public health, you're trying to solve poverty and racism, which means your work will never be done, but you will continue to do everything you can to make that mark. In terms of us not being any better off, when we did have that report, a few months ago, that was taking a look at our housing situation. And it was a pretty sobering, thank you for the word, report. But there was this one, not quite glimmer, but there was this piece that talked about how much worse off we would have been had Santa Fe not been so proactive on the work of the affordable, that the Office of Affordable Housing have done with the inclusionary zoning. Santa Fe was a leader in implementing that. So while we still do have a problem, this report was clear that our problem would have been far worse had we not been so proactive in the last couple of decades. And so this again is when we look at 5, 10, 20 years into the future and being able to better utilize and have a wider utilization of these funds, by comparison, we most likely would be better off than if we didn't. Based on what the past has told us. Councilman Viera?
Yep, I just add, I know that we all know it's a complex problem. And there's things that we've done incrementally that I think have helped. I mean, even just looking at the possibility of Las Estrellas as affordable housing area for development. It's not, I'm not talking about this particular proposal, but the fact that we have Las Estrellas as an option, and there's other land that could be developable for affordable housing. I just think there's a lot of different actions that we need to take. And the coalition outlined that for us, I want to say 2 years ago, about possibilities for short-term and long-term options. And some of them were very doable. Some were low-hanging fruit. Some required more work, like doing a tax like this. So I think I agree with my colleague that there's a lot of different tools we need to use, and this is one of them. And I disagree that we're throwing money at a problem. I think that we've been very intentional about how we use our funding, especially with Affordable Housing Trust Fund and being intentional about how we use it and making sure it's in line with the problems that we're seeing and some of the goals that we have for the city to tackle for our housing crisis. So I don't think it's throwing money at all. I think we have been intentional. It's just that there's not been enough and a reliable source to make that happen in multiple levels, not just with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but also in other ways that we need, like being able to utilize city land and being intentional about how we develop on our own land. So I think there's a lot of different facets. I just don't think we're throwing money. There's just not enough money. So.
And also to your point about not throwing money, to what Director Ladd's point, that these funds are highly regulated in the way that they can be utilized. And I believe they have an annual review from the state. Director Ladd, am I getting the time frame correct of how they've been used to make sure that they are in accordance with state law?
That's correct. We report annually.
Other questions? Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And appreciate the questions from my colleagues. I did have a couple of those as well for myself. But I do have a number of questions that will need further clarification on. But first, I definitely want to say I'm in full support of looking at how we can increase the Affordable Housing Trust Fund availability. I remember a couple of years ago when the community came before us to ask us to fully fund the trust fund. I was in full support of it, and I was surprised that there was some of my colleagues that weren't in full support of it, to the extent that some of my colleagues felt like, one, if we fully funded it, we couldn't expend all the resources, and two, that we didn't have the internal capacity to do so, meaning staff capacity, because the number of staff we had working within the department. So with that being said, Director Ladd, two follow-up questions on that. If we were to approve this and then the voters were to approve this, do you foresee us being able to utilize the excess resources that would be coming to this fund?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, absolutely, because every year we have applications that are far in excess of how much available funding we have.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate
Can
that.
I add to that? We also meet more than once now when we have more funding sources to allocate. And that gives nonprofit partners and other partners in the community ability to apply again for other projects or other initiatives. So if we need to, we meet more often to make those allocation recommendations.
So basically our current supply is not meeting demand. And we can definitely move that needle up to meet the demand. Now to the question of the internal staff capacity. You have the capacity to manage the additional proposed resources, which at the current figures that's in the proposal in front of us would potentially double the amount of resources in the trust fund.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, thank you for asking that question, because I think that's really important. More money doesn't help if we can't get it out into the community efficiently. But I want to assure you that we have a really great framework for administering the funds, and we're really good at it. So also, the issue with capacity isn't so much the amount of funding, it's how many different separate contracts you're doing. So I would expect with more funds, we would be able to fund bigger projects, but it wouldn't be a dramatic increase in the number of applications. It would hopefully be an increase in some, because we always want to get the money out as far as we can and in as diverse uses as we can. But I wouldn't expect that if we had double the money, it would be double the number of applications and resulting contracts.
Okay, thank you so much. And I guess just to plant a seed, if we do see the need for increased staff support, I would encourage you to bring that forth to us, because I'd be happy to budget more money for staff for your department, because this is a fund we need to ensure that the resources get out the door. And I don't want us to be in a predicament where we don't have enough staff to get it out the door. And I'd make that a priority as we move into budget season next year, that we increase staff to ensure that these resources get out the door.
I'd like to say something about that. I think we have really strong capacity with the staff. What really bogs us down is HUD funding. And that is like jumping through hoops every single time. It's very laborious. I think staff probably would really appreciate having a more flexible funding source instead of just relying on the CDBG funds that we get every year, because those are taxing on our staff. Those funds, wow, if you saw what staff has to go through to be able to administer those. Thankfully, there is a piece of it that does support our administrative needs. However, sometimes we wonder if it's really worth it. So we think about that. So I think just the fact that we would have more funding in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would be a lot more, it would just, I think it wouldn't keep staff in that cycle of like depending on HUD funding solely, which is a lot. It's not that much money, to be honest with you. It's not what we could get into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Right now, we need it, but I think if we started looking at the trust fund and building up that capacity, then we would be a lot better off.
Thank you, Counselor. Director Ladd, one more question for you. In regards to the fiscal year 23 funds that we just wrapped up now at the end of the month, or the end of last month, were we able to expend all the resources that were allocated to the fund?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, we expended the great majority of them. I believe we had, and if my grants person was here, he could answer much more accurately, and I can get you the follow-up. I don't want to just like speak off the top of my head and misremember it, but we had a couple of projects where construction got delayed for reasons that were not in anyone's controls. But for the most part, and sometimes those construction delays affect the down payment assistance as well, because the house isn't ready for the person to buy yet. So we had a couple of little things like that, but for the most part, our big expenditures were timely. We do have a budget adjustment that we'll do to bring forward some of the contract extensions and that kind of thing, and you'll be seeing that at the governing body level.
Okay, thank you, Director Ladd. I appreciate that. And if possible, if you can send over the percentage, if 90% were expended, 98, whatever it may be, that'd be helpful. And I guess my next line of questions revolves more around the transfer tax and transfer tax structure in general. And I don't know if this is a question for the city attorney or the sponsors, but are there any other cities or municipalities or counties in the state that have such a transfer tax that goes to an affordable housing trust fund, or the tax goes to another, the revenue goes to another identified source?
Chair Cassett, Councilor Garcia, I can answer that one. So there are not other cities with excise taxes that we're aware of.
So we would be the first.
That's correct.
Okay.
We've also, I think we've proposed two prior excise taxes, which, and part of the definition of a tax is that you charge an amount that goes to a different purpose rather than a fee, where you charge an amount and then it funds the program for which you're paying. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the other ones we've had were the proposed sugar tax and the proposed transfer tax.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And definitely remember the sugar tax. I living here at the time, I wasn't a resident of Santa Fe in 2008. I was still in grad school. But in reading the kind of what happened at that time, it's my understanding that should it have that question passed at the ballot, there would have been potential litigation concerning the constitutionality of this tax. And so is there a concern regarding any legality, constitutionality of such excise tax?
Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, I don't have any concern about that. And I'm not, if you have information about what the challenge would have been, there's a specific statute authorizing excise taxes on either property or services. And that's the same statute we relied upon in the other two cases as well.
Okay. Just making sure, should we move forward with this, that way we don't end up in never-ending litigation. That way, if the voters pass this, if we pass this, if the voters pass this, then it gets implemented and we put appropriate resources into the appropriate places and put people in homes.
And Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, I can never guarantee there won't be litigation, but I think the city has very good legal standing.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Quick question about the FIR, because the way it's written, it says there's no fiscal impact, but there's been identified revenue that's going to come forward. I mean, we can't really pinpoint a number, but I'm just wondering why there's not why it's checked that this has no fiscal impact whatsoever, because obviously it does. It would bring in a good number of resources to the city.
And Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, I believe we put some asterisks by that, right? In terms of the bill itself does not, but if it goes to the voters, et cetera, that's what we're doing for all the ballot questions. For example, we're working on a number of ballot questions, as you're aware. None of them, this microphone seems to be going on and off. None of them themselves will have an impact, but if the voters do vote for it, then there's a likely impact. And I don't, the city didn't have enough data to do, I think, some detailed analysis there. I know the sponsors have some of that and we're receiving more now, but I think the intent for all of them that are dependent on a vote, which this one is, there's gonna be a resolution for a ballot question on this one too. For none of them, we're putting, if I didn't do the asterisk on this, that's how we're doing the other ones, to say this doesn't have an impact. However, if the voters vote for it, there will be.
Okay. Funny you mentioned that, because I know separate legislation we're working on that's a ballot question. We did identify cost, and if that's the measure, if that's the route we're taking, I hope we're approaching all legislation equitably, because that there was potential staff identified, and we're at least through my conversation with the legislative team, that we were going to associate costs. So I'll keep an eye on that. The end of the resolution, I mean, the end of the bill states that should this not pass, then it pretty much sunsets this, and but it just says the provisions in this article 18-18 shall be effective 6 months from the date when the results of the election are certified to be in favor of the ordinance's adoption. I don't see any language in here in regards to if the results are certified not in favor. So what happens in that instance with this bill?
Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, this bill requires a positive vote, so it would not go into effect.
Okay, but does that need to be stipulated in the bill?
Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, no, that's just by way of law.
Just clarifying, just because sometimes folks will say, well, it didn't clearly state this, so just want to make sure that we're putting language in the appropriate places. Question about data, just because I know it's been brought up, and I do got some questions around how we're arriving at data. And I know, for example, the data that was brought up tonight, I still am not, the numbers aren't matching up for me. So for example, in 2022, there was 1,300 homes, roughly 1,305 homes sold in Santa Fe last year. If we're moving with the 400 number, that's roughly 30%. And I know my colleague said there's 45%. So that's a big disparity in number, 30% and 45%. So is it possible to and I don't know if the sponsors have that information now, but get a presentation or get some clarification in regards to how we're arriving at the data that's being thrown out. I'd like to see the clarification and calculations for how we're arriving at the $4 to $9 million range that's been thrown around. You know, the 45% figure that was thrown around earlier, because at the end of the day, numbers matter. And I want to make sure that as we're potentially planning for a potential adoption of this, that the public has full awareness of what's at stake. I don't want to oversell or undersell anything. I want to make sure that we are presenting a clear-cut case for the public to make a decision on how we move forward with not only this issue, but any other issue that's going to be before us on the ballot in November. So if the sponsors can speak to that tonight, fantastic. If not, definitely would like to get further clarification on that, on those numbers.
So just to clarify, it's not 4 to 9 millions. It's an estimated average of $4.5 million a year. Of course, depending on what happens with sales, it could be, you know, that's what we expect to see around that area. So, obviously in a year that there's a lot of homes well over $1 million, we'll see a higher amount, and homes that maybe, you know, other years where there are fewer homes or they're closer to just $1 million, then that would be a lower amount than those really high selling years. The data does come from, I do not have it on my fingertips, it would come from the MLS. And so I would need to reach out to get that data. But that is really what we're looking at, is what were the home sales and what did they actually sell for? So I do not have that on my fingertips. I don't believe Alexandra does either at this point, but we can get that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. And the data I'm looking at is from the MLS as well for 2022 and 2021 numbers. You know, 2022, there was roughly, as I mentioned, 1,300 homes sold. 2021, I'm looking at about 1,700 homes sold. And so big difference total in total. So just those numbers fluctuate, right? 1,700 homes versus 1,300 homes. That's a 400 difference. Where do those 400 homes sit? Are they above, below? Are they half and half? And so, again, I think this is where it's real critical that we have the data and the justified data to be able to present to the public to make a sound decision on how we move forward, and ultimately how decisions are made in regards to funds, because at the end of the day, this is a fund that the public should be well aware of how it's allocated, and I'm in full of support of how we're currently utilizing it. And if we're going to double it, that means much more opportunity on how we're going to be able to help community. But you know, I think that opportunity presents a great opportunity. I think Councilor Lee Rivera mentioned, you know, developing units. I mean, I think that's critical. That's the sustainability we need to begin developing here in this community, is ensuring that those units are built. I'm in full support of helping people stay in homes, but it doesn't, that doesn't help people leave the community. We're seeing folks leave this community at great numbers because there isn't the availability of homes. And so I think that's a future discussion to be had. Lastly, during the public comment last week, there was a couple folks who had mentioned that this does not, or new builds are exempt from this, or are they're included in. And I guess the question is, are new build homes included in this excise tax?
Chair Councilor Garcia, I was a little perplexed by that statement myself. I think I exchanged glances with Councilor Villarreal about that comment. I don't know if someone could buy unoccupied land and then build yourself, if that's what they're talking about, because I think that would be, you know, that wouldn't qualify. But if you're buying from someone who just built the house, I don't know what exemption would apply to that.
Okay.
So it seems that that would be covered. So if that, so if they meant the latter, where you're buying something someone else built and you're paying more than $1 million, I don't know why that would be excluded. If they're talking about building your own house and paying for a contractor after you already own the land, perhaps that's where that's coming from, but I'm not sure what they meant.
Okay, and I didn't see it in the exemption, so I was just asking for the clarification, just because I think the folks that brought it up, there should be the clarification provided back to them. I think that's all I've got right now, but I definitely appreciate all the work that my colleagues have put into this. I think, a lot of the questions are developed, how do we develop a strong law policy that ultimately leads to the benefit of, if not hundreds, potentially thousands of residents of the city of Santa Fe. And it's critical that we do everything we can to support affordable housing in our community. And so with that, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, a few questions and comments. Clarification on that. Let's say somebody has a house, a piece of property. Let's just say they're their own general building contractor. And they build it and value of the house is $2.5 million. What happens in that case?
Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, I don't think there'd be any reason to apply the tax in that case under the way the bill's written. So you're saying they
They have the land,
bought the land or they have.
built the house,
Yeah, so there's not
goes up
tax
for-
on construction.
valuation.
Yeah.
No construction.
The only service is the transfer of the property itself that's being taxed.
Thank you. I want to just revisit real quick the statement of throwing away money, and if I said that in an ill manner, I did not mean it. But I do have concerns about that we want to make sure every usable dollar that is collected from this is utilized. And again, the intent and my intent is to see how much more housing can be created. Because without creation of housing, then supply and demand tells you your price is going to stay way up there. And so a quick question in regards to how our ballot questions advertised. Want to know, when you go to vote and there's a bond question, a lot of times people see it. Oh, that sounds great. I'm going to vote for that. But how do we advertise for these? And with it being unbiased, because you obviously kind of want to leave it up to the voters, and that's what this is all about. That's what this collaboration is about. And this collaboration is about getting the best possible legislation out in front of them. And so I would just make a comment in regards to how we not only support or provide information about these ballot questions, but others that are being provided, as you mentioned, the people, you're working on a few of them, whether they pass or not. This governing body is to be unseen, but we want to make it fair to the voter, and you ultimately want them and their voices to speak. We just had a reduction in GRT. GRT just went down by, 1 percentage point. It was 8.18 something, and now it's 8.0 something or other. And so that was as of July 1st. And we just approved $1 million that came from GRT to another department that is used for the same type of assistance for housing, people that are being evicted and so on and so forth. And there's and the list goes on and on and on. And I just want the voters and the people out there to be aware that we are utilizing every single dollar that we do tax them on, because the GRT is a tax. We just don't see it. We pay it. When you buy a house currently, New Mexico sales tax is at 4.88%. No county taxes. So this is on top of that. And I know it's on top of $1 million, which goes to people that can't afford it. And the question is do we have a vision as how this will affect the higher end market? We'll be here another 2 hours on that question. Without solid data, we don't know. And time will tell. And then the last thing I have is just a request for data offline about builders that we have in the vicinity that are committed to providing 100% affordability. I think that's what we need. Not 10%, not market rate housing here, and here, and then, oh, that little parcel over there, we're got it on a good deal, we're gonna provide 50%, or 60% or 20%, I don't know. But I want those answers in regards to, so I can make a final vote on this with as possible data possible, and that's where I will end. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Regarding the ballot language, we will be passing a resolution. There will be an accompanying resolution that spells out the ballot language. So everybody will be able to see that before and decide on what that ballot language would look like. So that's something to be introduced next week at governing body. Just to clarify that. Councilman Villarreal.
Madam Chair, just a couple things. In terms of what I'm hearing is to make sure that any ballot measure that gets passed by the council to get on the ballot, that it gets equal education and fair promotion, so people know what they're voting on. And I agree with that. That's what was my concern when we were looking at the Charter Commission and some of those recommendations. And if we considered them, how would they all equally get message so people know what they're about? And so I think that is an important piece. And there just need clarity. You say builders who are committed to affordable housing. So through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we fund nonprofit partners. There's in some cases partners that are LLCs. Is that correct, Alex? And other entities that can propose development options to us as it relates to affordable housing. The majority that come to us are the nonprofit partners. And I guess I'm curious what you're wanting to know about builders who are committed to affordable housing, because that's not necessarily directly related to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's really kind of up to them to decide that they want to commit to that. And we see a few, some commit to, getting the low income tax credits at the federal level. Takes some work, but it is possible. But I guess I'm curious more if you could say more about that, because I wouldn't want staff to spend time doing that because, it's a private enterprise, really has their own, it's really up to them if they want to make that commitment. And so maybe you could say more about that.
I'll make it smaller. In the last 5 years, we'll just take, because that takes not just pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now somewhat post-pandemic. Builders who are nonprofit, maybe 3 that were mentioned in our previous discussion. Even though they're nonprofits, what percentage of housing was offered at affordable rates versus, and we're talking about what people can afford, not just what affordable average is, versus what they sold at market rate. There obviously is a profit margin to that. That profit margin as a nonprofit should go back into here too. And we want to have good faith that they are good partners with us. And so I know those come down in front of us for approval. And many times either we don't pay attention to them, they just get passed on consent or things of that nature. And so those are just my concerns. Before I finally vote yes on this, I would just maybe like to have even an offline conversation, and we can do that.
Thank you. I guess I'm wondering, are you wanting to know who has, through the Affordable Housing Trust Funds, leveraged development projects that actually built affordable units? Is that what you're asking? Or are you just saying in general out there in the world?
No, in Santa Fe, and that would be helpful. And how much percentage of that did they provide at affordable rates, whether it's
but as it
very
relates,
affordable,
sorry, as it relates to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund funds, or
that were
just,
provided funding.
okay. Okay,
I think that would be helpful for me.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? In a motion, I did forget to put this on the agenda for Economic Development Advisory Committee. So I do want within the motion, Aaron, do we need to make a single motion or should we make two motions to refer this bill?
Chair Cassett, counselors, you can do it, I think, at the same time. You can
Okay.
Make a referral and then whatever else you're doing.
Okay, so motion on the bill as well as included in that motion to also refer this to the August 2nd Economic Development Advisory Committee.
So moved. Can I see that?
Well, then you move to approve and
I'll move to approve bill number 2023-23 with the referral to go to the yeah,
August 2nd
August 2nd
Economic Development.
Economic Development Advisory Committee.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call?
Can I make a comment?
Oh. I'm sorry, yes. Any other questions or comments before?
Do we have the authority to refer to other committees? I thought that was only done during introduction and I remember us having this conversation around referral and Public Works and Utilities and we,
Chair Cassett, Counselor Garcia, you can make referral. It can't be to come back to you. I think that was maybe part of the prior discussion. We did consult the rules in relation to this, but you're right. It generally is upon introduction.
Okay.
But in the motions permitted for committees, one is referral, and I don't know if it's specific to advisory committees. It might be.
I think it's just referred to
Another committee for review. And then if it's already been to a committee, then it's upon the chair has to agree to take it as well. So if the committee's already seen it and you want to refer it to that committee again, then that chair has to agree to it. But it also wouldn't come back to you afterwards.
gotcha. Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
And Madam Chair, I just want to add that the Community Development Commission did hear this item as a discussion item on our agenda today. And even though it was not on the pathway, we still wanted to talk about it because it does directly impact us, or at least the members that are currently on. So it was actually a really helpful discussion. There were some good questions that I think we'll need to answer as we move forward. And so I appreciate the just perspectives and, you know, lived experience from some of the CDC members to really understand what this does and how it's structured, and some really good conversation happened. So they did recommend approval, although that may not be valid in this instance, but they still think it was important to let you all know that. So thank you.
Thank you. If no other questions or comments, then we will go ahead and have a roll call.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Abstain and explain my vote.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. And Counselor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the discussion, the information, the hard work on this. You know, I'm glad it's going to go to EDAC. Like to get that perspective as to how this affects our overall housing market, and the rest of the stuff. And so I'm still on, you know, my abstention is just as I'd like to hear more and move forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to matters from staff. Any matters from staff today? No matters from staff.
No matters, staff, Madam Chair, from the CD.
Got it. Matters from the committee? No. Matters from the chair. Forgot to thank both Director Ladd and City Attorney McSherry for being here. Thank you. And other than that, our next meeting will be Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. And at 7:05, we are adjourned. Thank you.